This story will make lots of sense when I take you back to the very beginning. I work for a popular publishing company as an editor. The job isn't a typical 9 to 5 over a 5-day week schedule. It's always long hours and overtime's required, especially leading up to deadlines. Caffeine's generally the go-to brew around the office. I usually indulge in no less than 5 cups a day with the odd tea thrown in, but of course, those are also highly caffeinated. That day I laid off the piping hot version and settled with a caramel iced latte. A definite sugar rush in the morning, but I needed to beat the heat. Although May was still part of spring, the weather felt just like mid-June, humid like no other. If you styled your hair straight and went outside, but your hair is naturally curly, the sweat will have it turned back to its natural state, and if you're out there wearing makeup that isn't waterproof, I guarantee it'll look like your face is melting off. I took a sip from my drink as I closed my office window blinds. The glare was too much on my computer. I was getting a headache. My cell phone buzzed and I picked it up. It was this guy Grayson I was seeing for about a couple of months now. It wasn't serious enough to call him my boyfriend. I was casually seeing where it would go. We were on the same page with that decision. "Hey Eileen," said Grayson. "Did I catch you at a good time?" "It's never a good time," I playfully jabbed back. "But I guess I have a couple minutes of my precious time I can share." "That's more than enough," laughed Grayson. "I was wondering..." Before he could finish, there was a knock on my door, and the intern Sasha walked in quietly and dropped off mail on my desk. "Thanks," I mouthed, as she nodded while leaving. "Sorry, Grayson, I was interrupted. What were you saying?" "I was wondering if you had any plans for the Victoria long weekend," he said. I looked at my calendar. "Isn't that this upcoming weekend?" "Yeah," he said. "It's 4 days away." "Well, I have to send my final edits back to an author who wants to print his new self-help book. My goal is to have that done by this Friday evening. After that, my weekend looks pretty much open," I said. "That's great," exclaimed Grayson. "Would you be interested in joining me on a weekend away in Muskoka, Ontario? I have a beach house out there." I barely knew this guy. We had been on about 6 dates in total over the course of 2 months. I did like his company, though. I mean, we sort of had a similar life. He was a head chef at a very busy high-end restaurant in downtown Toronto, so meeting customer deadlines and working under pressure is something he understood far too well. We were able to connect on our jobs on that level. We also had ended our long-term relationships based off of unfaithful partners. And we lived alone. I lived in an apartment in North York, and he was situated in a loft in central Toronto. I guess there was very little reason to say no, so I took him up on the offer. But I made sure to call up my close girlfriend Talia and let her know where I'll be that weekend, in case things went south. I've watched quite a few crime documentaries about missing women. I knew when to trust your gut feeling. I told Talia that in the off chance something were to happen, and if I couldn't text her a long paragraph without giving too much away, I would just send her one 3-letter word: red. That would be her signal to alert the police. She told me I was overthinking things, and if I was iffy on it, maybe I shouldn't go. Talia was right for sure about that, but I thought if Grayson was actually someone I'd like to call my boyfriend in the future, I guess I needed to take that chance. The days flew by and I was so buried in my work that Friday had arrived. I got a text from Grayson who said, "Looking forward to seeing you. Pick you up at 6:30 p.m. Shoot, I thought. I'd forgotten to pack my things. I looked at the clock on my computer. It was 20 past noon. Luckily, I was on my last page of edits, which were super quick. I finished the corrections and added a few notes. I then emailed the 325 pages back to the author for his self-help book. I gathered my things off my desk and did a quick tidy of my office. I then walked out of my office and told intern Sasha that I was leaving for the day and to have anyone who requests to speak with me to email me directly. I told her to have a great long weekend, and then left. When I got to my building, I parked underground and took the elevator up to my apartment. I opened the door, and then instantly my dog Teddy started barking and wagging its tail. He was so excited to see me. He was an auburn-colored toy poodle. I had him for about 2 years. I knew he was hungry, so I poured some water and food into his bowl, and Teddy didn't wait to dig in. I poured myself some milk and Fruit Loops into a bowl and ate it at the counter. I then went and sat on the couch and decided to reply to Grayson's text from earlier. "Can't wait to enjoy a relaxing weekend. I asked him if it was okay to bring Teddy along. I didn't have a sitter organized, and he obviously wasn't able to fend for himself for a few days. He was very needy. Grayson said he loved dogs, and it was fine to bring him. Great, I replied. See you soon. I packed a few casual outfits and a couple dresses in case we decided to go out somewhere. I also took my laptop and a few magazines. Sunscreen was a must, and a couple bottles of Merlot. I did a spot clean of the apartment and then looked at the time. I had a couple hours to spare, so I put on the TV, and without knowing, I dozed off. My nap was interrupted with my ringtone. It was 6:10 p.m. I answered, and Grayson said he was earlier than expected, and he was waiting outside by the entrance. I grabbed Teddy's things and my stuff. I double-checked the appliances to make sure nothing was left on. That was my inner OCD. I then put Teddy on a leash and locked my door. It was still bright as day outside. I walked up to Grayson's black Lexus IS. He smiled at me through the window and then got out of his car. He told me to sit and he would put my stuff in the trunk. What a gentleman, I thought. I picked Teddy up and put him in his puppy carrier. It was a little over a 3-hour drive and he might need to go to the bathroom. I wasn't sure if Grayson was planning on making any stops along the way. I didn't want him to fuss over me and my dog. I buckled up, and shortly after he got into the driver's seat. He was average height, medium build, slightly pale, hazel eyes, and dark black hair. He had the perfect smile. He was wearing a black v-neck tee and light blue jean shorts with black Puma sneakers. "You ready?" he said. "Of course," I replied. "This is going to be fun." He clicked on the radio and skipped to the country station. He told me he wasn't a fan of the genre, but on a long trip, it was kind of fitting. I didn't like country music at all either, other than the mainstream songs, but I kind of got what he meant. The music really complemented the lengthy drive, especially the scenery along the way. Grayson and I talked here and there about work and any summer plans we had. We stopped over midway at a drive-thru and picked up some coffee and donuts. I also took Teddy out for a quick stretch. He had obviously some pent-up energy he needed to use up. We finally pulled up to the house. Oh, it was gorgeous. It was a one-level, end-of-lot home, at least 1,800 square feet long. Pure white with so many windows. You couldn't see through the house as there was a tint over it, but there was some light shining through. Grayson helped me carry my things to the porch and open the door. He told me to make myself comfy while he unloaded the rest of the car. Teddy ran in and started exploring right away. I walked through the house. There was a dining room in the far right by the entrance. On the left there was a study room. Next to it was a powder room. The kitchen followed, with a fully open concept. The living room was situated right across from it. High ceilings and 2 sliding doors adjacent each other. One led to a solarium which overlooked the water, and the smaller sliding door was a walkout to the balcony. There was a narrow hallway that led to the bedrooms. First there were 2 bedrooms on the right, then 1 full bathroom on the left. The master room was right at the end, with another full-size bathroom inside. The home was stunning, and I could see why Grayson bought it, to get away from all the hustle and bustle of the city life to a serene and quiet place. Simply the best feeling. I walked to the kitchen and saw Teddy's bed against one of the walls, and he was lying down biting on his chew toy. Grayson was in the kitchen organizing the fridge with groceries he had bought. "Let me give you a hand," I said. "Sure," he replied. "Would you like me to fix you up a drink?" "Yeah," I said. "That would be perfect." Grayson opened the cupboard and took out 2 glasses. He placed some ice cubes and poured 2 shots each of Malibu rum and topped it with some coconut water and a couple mint leaves. He handed me the glass and raised his, saying, "Cheers to a spontaneous but interesting and hopefully fun weekend getaway." We clicked glasses and I took a sip. The drink was delicious. I told Grayson I have never had the mix before. He told me it really was a smooth tropical drink, but as a liqueur, too much will get you drunk fast, that it was important to pace ourselves. I laughed and told him I wasn't planning on drinking too much, as I wanted to remember the whole experience. After the fridge was stocked, Grayson put on some jazz music and lit the electrical fireplace. I was feeling a bit of the effects from the alcohol, but I guess it helped because I started to talk more. "So, Mr. Grayson, what will you be preparing for dinner tonight?" Grayson stood behind the kitchen counter and said, "I'm glad you asked, Eileen. I was thinking to make a crispy pork belly on a bed of mash with a side of roasted carrots and peas and a drizzle of a gravy reduction. "Ooh, very fancy," I said. I silently then watched Grayson prepare the meal. He was in the zone, and I really admired a guy who showed that kind of focus. If there was a scent for yummy, that is what the room smelled like. I closed my eyes and took small sips from my drink while listening to the soothing sounds of jazz. "Hey," Grayson said as he touched my arm, nearly startling me. "Dinner's ready on the table." I smiled and went to the powder room to wash my hands. I then walked into the dining room and saw the table beautifully set up with a vase of roses and 2 white candles lit. "Whoa," I said. "You definitely went all out creating a romantic ambiance." "Well, I work in a restaurant. This is the regular setting every day. The ambiance makes the food taste way better," said Grayson. "I'm sure it does," I laughed. "You would know better than me." "Oh, that reminds me," I said. "I actually bought some wine. It's in my suitcase. Let me go grab it." Teddy followed me to the first room. I opened the zipper and was sifting through when I found the 2 bottles of Merlot. I grabbed them both and was leaving the room when Teddy started barking. He was seated in the middle of the hallway and was barking non-stop. I heard Grayson's voice trailing in, saying, "Is everything okay?" "Stop it, Teddy," I said, who now began growling. I looked down the hall towards Grayson's room, but I saw nothing. I picked Teddy up and walked back to the kitchen. I poured him some food, and he started to eat. I then went back to the dining room and sat down. "Sorry about that," I said. "I guess Teddy was hungry. He was barking in the hall for no reason." "It's all under control now, so it's not a problem," said Grayson. "Dig in." I took a bite of the pork belly, and it was so crunchy and juicy. The flavors were amazing. Grayson was an exceptional chef, and I can't believe I waited this long to finally try his food. "So, how is it?" he said, as he poured the wine into the glasses. "It is incredible," I said. "I've never tasted pork like this, ever." "Thank you," blushed Grayson. "I'm looking forward to seeing what you have for dessert," I said. After dinner, I helped Grayson carry the dishes to the sink. He took out 2 saucers and pulled out 2 slices of cake from the fridge. "I baked it this morning." It was a strawberry shortcake with in-house made vanilla ice cream. He turned on the Nespresso machine and brewed a shot of Colombian espresso. We sat in the living room with the lights turned off and the fireplace going. The cake was moist and decadent. I would have gone for a second serving if there was one. I told Grayson it really was the best choice I made joining him today. I then helped him wash the dishes and told him I would retreat to my room. He understood and told me to have a good night. I mean, I could have shared the bed with him, but I wasn't comfortable as of yet. I changed into a baggy tee and a cotton pair of loose-fitted shorts. I called Teddy to the bed, but he was sitting outside my room, looking up and barking. I quickly grabbed him off the floor and told him to stop it. I looked up at the ceiling, and there was a cutout that led to the roof. I backed away from the door and shut it, then I locked it. I quickly got into the bed. I had a childhood paranoia of those cutouts and ceilings. I think they were called scuttle hutches. Maybe it was watching horror films growing up, but I always got goosebumps that something eerie either lived up there or lurked. My parents and I lived in 3 houses my whole life, and call it coincidence or supernatural, but each time the cutout would be either in the inside of my room or my closet, or right outside my bedroom door. I'd countless nightmares of ghosts popping out of them, or would have sleepless nights just staring outside my door, hoping the tiny piece of board wouldn't open on its own. That's a huge reason why I don't have a house of my own. I couldn't find one scuttle hutch in my apartment, so I didn't have that fear. I know I'm a grown woman, but seeing that attic hatch brought back all kinds of unwanted memories. Now I wished I considered sleeping in the same room as Grayson. At least I had Teddy with me. I finally nodded off to sleep. In the middle of the night, I heard an infrequent banging on my door. It sounded as if someone was sitting against the door and banging their head. I was too scared to get back up and check. I picked up my phone, which was plugged in the wall next to the nightstand, and turned on my flashlight. Teddy was fast asleep, so he didn't notice the sound. Could it have been in my head? I left the flashlight on and fell asleep again. Around 8:30 in the morning, I woke up to the smell of breakfast. Grayson must have been up cooking. I got out of the bed and Teddy followed me. I brushed my teeth and went into the kitchen. Grayson greeted me and I told him whatever he was making smelled like Denny's. "Thanks," he said. "Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes. I decided to take Teddy out for a quick walk. The air was fresh and the temperature was slightly cool. Maybe it was because of the waterfront, but it was balanced. I was passing several houses when I spotted a neighbor in her mid-40s. "Hi there, I'm Margaret. You're new around here?" she said. I told her I'm just visiting up here with a friend. "Oh yes," she said, "the last house down the street. He's the owner who visits occasionally but doesn't live up here. Compared to 10 years ago, only a handful of us actually live out here. The winters are bitter cold, but I love it by the water." I thanked Margaret for the chat and told her I had to head back for breakfast. When I got inside, I went to the kitchen. "Welcome back," Grayson smiled. I set everything up in the dining room. He handed me a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. We sat in the chairs, and I couldn't get over how appealing a simple breakfast food looked on my plate. There was crispy bacon, homemade fries, eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce, salmon on top of it, on top of an English muffin. A side of pancakes as well, with maple syrup and fresh whipped cream. This guy was really treating me. "How did you sleep last night?" asked Grayson. "Well, that you mention it, I was sort of awoken by banging on my door. Did you hear it too?" Grayson was a bit puzzled. "No, I can say I didn't." "Strange," I replied, "because on 2 occasions yesterday, Teddy barked in the hallway. He never does that unless he feels directly threatened or sees a stranger." "Oh, okay. That's why Teddy was going crazy last night." "Funny that you mentioned it," said Grayson, "but my brother's dog has behaved like that multiple times when they have come to visit. But that's about it." "I hate to be nosy," I said, "but do you know anything about the previous owners when you bought the place?" "Well, I don't know them personally. This house was actually auctioned off. I fell so much in love with it, and it didn't look the way it does now. I did a lot of upgrades to the interior and exterior. That is why it looks very modern compared to the other homes around here. Those are quite dated, as early as the 80s. "I see," I said. "But no information from the agent about the home itself?" "The only thing I knew," said Grayson, "is a family of 3 lived up here. And when I started to do renos, I found a couple belongings of a young girl's in the room that you're actually sleeping in. It had a Barbie doll, and one of those lifelike babies, and some coloring books, and possibly a purse. But I tossed all of those out." With those words, Grayson sort of laid my suspicions of the house being haunted to rest. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading in the solarium. It was breathtaking to have the perfect sunlight shine through the glass room and then the picturesque water flowing right outside. I too was falling in love with the home. I didn't want to leave and go back to my normal life. That evening, Grayson made the most satisfying duck confit on a bed of rice and a side of buttered vegetables. So succulent. I definitely could get used to home-cooked meals like this. It was better than the frozen dinners I often turned to after a long day at the office. I had one too many glasses of sparkling rosé that I talked myself into sleeping in Grayson's bed for the night. It was around 3:30 a.m. that I felt parched and got up to go get a glass of water from the kitchen. I opened Grayson's door. I don't know if I still was half asleep, but I had to blink twice. I saw the shadow of a girl, maybe as young as 7. She was sitting on the floor of the room I had slept in the previous night. She was banging her head against the door. I looked up. The attic hatch was open. The girl stopped banging her head and turned to me, but I couldn't see her face. Then I heard a loud shrilling scream come from her mouth. She then floated up into the hole that led to the attic, and then the covering closed slowly behind her. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ear. I shut the door. I was shaking as I walked to the ensuite bathroom and opened the sink. I cupped my hands and drank some water and then threw some on my face. What I thought was an imagination was in fact real. Not only was my childhood paranoia amplified, but a ghost emerging from a hole. That was a nightmare that belongs in dreams. But what I saw was a reality. I crawled back into bed, but slept with one eye open. The next morning, I didn't mention what I had seen to Grayson, but I did have an idea. I took Teddy for another walk, and I was hoping to run into Margaret. I saw her sipping coffee from a cup while seated on her porch. "Hey, Margaret, you're just the one I wanted to see." "Good morning, my dear," she said. "How can I help you?" I asked her, since she lived in this area the longest, if she had any information on the previous owners of the house I was staying at. All I knew was there was a family of 3. She looked a bit taken aback by my question, but wanted to answer it. She told me to have a seat on the chair next to her. "You're right about that piece of information," she said. "About 10 years ago, a family of 3 lived there. A man, a woman, and their 6-year-old daughter. They were the Caldwells. Very sweet couple. Mr. Caldwell was an investor in the housing industry, and Mrs. Caldwell was a stay-at-home mom. Mr. Caldwell was always throwing extravagant parties whenever he could to celebrate business or a birthday. I've been to a couple of them myself. One day I was out with my husband for a brisk walk. I spotted Mrs. Caldwell leaving her car with a man. They went into the house together. This was about mid-morning, after she had dropped her daughter to school. Mr. Caldwell, as usual, was away for business. I assumed it was a relative or friend with her, but then I would see the same man with her more often, 3 or 4 times a week at that. I had some thoughts in my mind, but didn't want to be a judgmental neighbor, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. This went on for 8 months, when one day I heard shouting outside. I went out, and it was both of them yelling and swearing at each other. Mr. Caldwell accused Mrs. Caldwell of having an affair with one of his close friends. She was crying and denying everything. When he officially revealed that he had evidence of them together intimate because he had cameras set up in certain places of the house, that he had found text messages between them plotting to divorce their partners and taking half his shares and assets. I yelled a bit from the distance and said, "Are you all okay?" Mrs. Caldwell immediately ran to me crying. I told her let's go inside, as other neighbors might be getting a show that they didn't need. As we were walking to my house, Mr. Caldwell yelled back, "I will talk to you when you get back. Just know we are through." He went back into his house. I tried to calm Mrs. Caldwell down. She told me her story of an unhappy marriage, how she was always alone while her husband worked. She hated it. She wanted a real life where she could also work and have a social life. Derek was her husband's good friend, but he was going through the same thing with his wife. They connected and fell in love. Now, although Mrs. Caldwell was going through pain and a disaster of a marriage, there was a way of going about it. Communicating or filing for divorce, not cheating. They also had a young daughter who depended on them both. They should know better. Mrs. Caldwell and I heard a loud bang coming from outside, but we thought it was a car engine backfiring or something. It was close to midnight when Mrs. Caldwell said she should get going. My husband and I said we would walk her home. When we got to the front of the house, the sensor light came on. In the front yard, lying next to the tree, was Mr. Caldwell. He was unresponsive when Mrs. Caldwell tried to wake him up. He had a pill bottle in his hand, and the label read oxycodone. It was empty. Mrs. Caldwell ran inside to find her daughter. In the meantime, we called the cops. I followed Mrs. Caldwell inside when I heard her scream. There was blood on the walls where the little girl Bella's room was, but there was no Bella to be found. The police arrived, and we were asked to leave. Mrs. Caldwell was requested to go to the station to answer questions. A few days later, an officer who was working on the case showed up and told me the chilling truth behind the investigation. He said since there were cameras in the couple's bedroom, kitchen, front entrance, and hallway, they were able to review the footage and know exactly what happened. Bella, the daughter, her head was banged repeatedly against her bedroom door, and then she was shot in the head with a .22 caliber gun. For some odd reason, her body was placed in the attic. Mr. Caldwell committed the murder, perhaps as revenge to what his wife did. But to know exactly why he chose to hide his daughter is a mystery. He didn't leave a note or message, as it probably was an act out of pure anger and passion. The officers did ask Miss Caldwell if she could find some reasoning for the motive behind hiding their daughter in the attic, but she herself wasn't able to think of anything. It must have been random. That was the conclusion. Obviously, Mrs. Caldwell was let go because her alibi was with me. However, there's an update. From what I heard, Mrs. Caldwell was taken to a hospital about a year later as she wasn't taking care of her personal hygiene, eating properly, even cleaning the home. It was filthy. She was reliant on sleeping pills and was always intoxicated with wine. She was admitted in the psych ward and has been under special care since. Unbelievably sad, I said. A perfect family who had a dark secret that ended in tragedy. It is quite the story, said Margaret. So, I said, the reason I came here was to ask you that, because now everything makes sense. You see, I've been hearing and seeing strange things. I heard banging on the door of the room I was sleeping in, and you said Bella's father did that to her before he killed her. I even saw a girl the second night float into the attic. And my little dog, he just keeps barking in that same hallway. There definitely has to be some correlation here. Well, my dear, said Margaret, I would believe it. The energies of death and pain have a way of lingering around. Fear only makes it grow. Have you had a chat with the owner, Grayson, about this? I asked. No, I haven't. He's rarely up here. I'd assumed the person who sold him the house would have mentioned it, she said, and then I went back to the house. As usual, Grayson had breakfast ready to go. Today was a chicken Cobb salad with blue cheese dressing, a fruit parfait, and a piping hot cup of Earl Grey tea. Hello, beautiful, he said. I'm sorry it's not the overtop menu you may be used to these last couple of days, but I assure you, it's delicious. I thought I'd serve it right here on the breakfast island. I pulled out the stool and sat down. I ate the food quietly, and I guess Grayson felt a bit of the tension when he asked, Eileen, is something wrong? Grayson, since you bought this place, you've never spoken to the neighbors or anyone about what happened here? No, said Grayson, quite sincerely. The thing is, I never stay up here too long, maybe a few days. I usually relax indoors and kind of sleep a lot. You know, working in a demanding restaurant every day can take a toll on your mind and body. Of course, I said. Look, I actually had some weird experiences here, and I haven't shared it with you because I obviously didn't want you to think I was some kind of whack job. Try me, said Grayson. I told him about the banging on the door on the first night and the ghost girl on the second. He almost spit out his tea and said, Okay, was that the reason you slept in my room last night? Bingo, I said, trying not to feel embarrassed. I thought I was going crazy for a minute, but then I spoke to the lady Margaret, who lives not too far from you, and she told me a murder happened here, that a father killed his young daughter and then himself, in a rage because his wife was screwing his good friend. Grayson's face turned pale. He ran his hands through his hair a few times. I don't know what to say. I mean, no one disclosed that information when I got the place. I'm sickened, he said. Grayson paused for a couple more minutes. You know what? He said. I have had a reoccurring dream, and it's only whenever I stay here. It's of me lying in my bed, watching a man stand in my ensuite bathroom, pouring a bottle of something in his mouth. And on the corner of the sink appears to be a gun. The man turns to look at me in my bed, and then he tries to walk over to me, but every time I just wake up. Oh my God, I said. The guy killed himself by swallowing pills, and he used a gun to kill his daughter. I could tell in that moment, Grayson was freaked, and so was I. I apologized to him and told him I wouldn't be strong enough to make it through another night here. He agreed. After we ate, I helped Grayson clean the place, and then we loaded the car up. I put Teddy back in his carrier in the back seat. He almost fell asleep right away. Grayson locked the front door, and we headed back to the city. We kept talking about the wild weekend we had, and Grayson said he wouldn't want to go up there alone anymore, especially since he bought the place as a space to relax. He won't be able to do that knowing the horrors that happened there. When we got to my place, I apologized to Grayson for cutting our trip short, and if he wanted to stay the night. He was happy that I offered and told me he liked the idea. That night we played a drinking game, and we slept peacefully. 3 months later, Grayson and I started to date. I really enjoyed his company, and of course he sold me on his cooking. I was at work one day when I get a call from him. Hey babe, he said. Now, I think I have some pretty good news. I put my Muskoka home up as an Airbnb, but check this out. It has a disclaimer that it's haunted. I think a lot of teens or people who love the paranormal stuff will definitely book. It might not be our taste, but could bring some unsettling fun to others. Well, that's the best news I heard all week, I said. But what about your dream of having a place to de-stress? I think staying with you at your place is good enough escape from reality, he said. Okay, I laughed. Same time this weekend then? I'll make the popcorn. And I'll bring the scary stories, he said. Hey Scary Story fans, I'm Suzanna Dutt, and thanks for listening to these short tales written and narrated by me. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have a creepy story that's fiction or non-fiction and would like me to share it in the next featured video, feel free to send it to the email in the description below. In the meantime, sweet dreams!